Hi. Well, the moment is here. It's time for the video I threatened to make several months back in my other video about The Office. What more could I have to say? Well, I wanted to focus on Michael. Much of the humor of The Office surrounds cringe, socially inappropriate behavior, and awkwardness. But for Michael Scott, regional manager of Dunder Mifflin's Scranton branch, there is a deeper issue beneath his social shenanigans. He seems to struggle with fundamental and basic logic, making him metaphysically stunted. Michael's troubles with logic involve a number of themes. There are causation errors, categorical errors, errors involving incomprehension of limitations, and enforced positivism. I will argue that overall, Michael's problems with logic exist in a feedback loop with his dependence on an alternative logic, the logic of emotions. Let's start with causation, since nothing's more fundamental to logic than the idea that cause precedes effect and effect follows cause, and that they have some sort of relationship with each other. In Season 3, Episode 17, Cocktails, Michael says to the camera, "Friends arrive early to parties, ergo de facto, show up early, become a good friend." He's reversing causation here. He's apparently unable to comprehend that causation flows the opposite way. Also note the use of Latin. He confabulates a mashup, not an actual Latin phrase, and his bastardized use of Latin underscores the illogical level where he exists. Beyond simply reversing cause and effect, Michael shows an ability to assume an effect very different from what would logically follow from a cause. For example, in Season 3, Episode 18, The Negotiation, regarding Wikipedia, Michael says, "Anyone can write anything, so you know you're getting the best information." This is an absurd and contradictory if-then statement that lacks coherence. The antecedent doesn't imply the consequent. In fact, it implies its opposite. Michael even demonstrates an ability to ignore causal relationships altogether. In the scene that I mentioned in that previous video I made from Season 6, Episode 1, two interns saw Stanley with his extramarital partner at a bar, and when Michael asks if it was Stanley's sister, the interns say, well, if it was, then what they were doing was totally illegal. Michael replies, drugs? Michael here fundamentally misunderstands an if-then statement. He replies to the then part without considering the if part. And in Season 5, Episode 22, Dream Team, when he's cheering up Pam about the Michael Scott Paper Company, he tells her a story about himself. He says that he does his best work when people don't believe in him, and gives as an example when he was in high school. His math teacher told him that he was going to flunk out, but the very next day, Michael went out and scored more goals than anyone in the history of the hockey team. This shows how he copes with a stressor by ignoring it completely, essentially canceling out a negative emotion with a logically unrelated positive emotion rather than existing by the rigid rules of causation. Some of Michael's issues with causation reveal a method of absolving himself of responsibility. In Season 4, Episode 10, Chair Model, Michael says, "Dating shouldn't be hard for someone like me, but it is, and you know why? Because you people won't help me." This is a false causal relationship designed to avoid introspection. He's removing responsibility from himself for a fact that he's solely responsible for. Does he really believe it? It certainly seems so, but it's hard to tell because it's such a gross deflection of what would logically be his responsibility. Beyond simply absolving himself of responsibility, his causation issues serve to help him find quick solutions to difficult questions. Like in Season 7, Episode 15, The Search, when Michael's trying to convince Holly that they are meant to be together, he says, "Why does the sun rise in the east? Why do magnets stick together? Because everybody says so." This is a reversal of causation that is functioning to limit challenging thinking. And finally, we will close this discussion of causation with an example in a slightly different realm. In Season 5, Episode 1, Weight Loss, as the staff stands on a large scale, Michael says, "Let's suck in our guts." This shows a lack of understanding of basic physics, which seems worth mentioning. Causation is the metaphysical description of how things work, but for a metaphysical description of what things are, we need to look at categories. Michael shows an amazing ability to confuse categories of distinct classes of things. This can function similarly to his issues with causation to limit his sense of responsibility. In Season 4, Episode 4, Money, Michael says, "Yes, it would have been nice to be prepared for this PowerPoint meeting with Ryan, but you know what else would have been nice? Winning the lottery." He equates something within his control with something outside of his control. He equates his own agency with fate, and in doing so, he creates a false equivalency between distinct categories and avoids responsibility. But of course, not all of Michael's issues with categories relate to avoidance of responsibility. Before we go any further, we need to give the prime example of Michael's issues with categories. In Season 5, Episode 3, Business Ethics, while out with Holly, he says, "I just don't want my employees thinking that their jobs depend on performance." I mean, what sort of a place is that to call home? A classically characteristic Michael line and a fundamental categorical error. He adds soon after, "Well, you have to tolerate a lot when you're part of a family." Holly responds, "It's not a family, it's a workplace." And then they end up together, of course. Spoiler alert, but it's been out for ages. It's possible that she ends up balancing him, partly because she has a sense of reality, including all of its boundaries and categories. A casual viewer might think that by considering a workplace a home and coworkers family members, Michael is actually assuming too much responsibility rather than avoiding it. But it often seems like the responsibility is on his coworkers to treat him like family more so than on him to treat them like family. But the bottom line is that if categories are drawn more strongly in Michael's life, it would make him realize the lack of fulfillment he gets from at least one of the domains. He would see how empty one of them is. But when everything is blurred, it's easier for him to feel okay and to not feel like the domain of home is kind of neglected and not fulfilling. His issues with categories aren't fully able to serve as a prophylaxis against emotional suffering because these same issues result in him missing out on positive experiences just as much. In part 2 of the weight loss episode, he offers to buy Holly's 2 Counting Crows tickets, and then he rips them up in front of her to help her forget about the show with the date that never called her, instead of offering to go with her. His significantly stupid social faux pas stems from the categorical error of mistaking himself as outside of the class of potential holders of the tickets. He's fixated on himself as a controller and a proprietor of the situation, so to speak. It's tempting to assume that Michael would have wanted someone else to rip up the tickets for him if he was in that situation and feeling abandoned, both since it's what he did and because it fits his pattern of going around rather than through feelings. It's a way of fixing feeling inferior by feeling superior instead of understanding the inferiority and fixing that. On some lighter notes, not all of Michael's issues with categories reflect on his deep-seated fear of intimacy. In that same Season 6 opener episode I mentioned, Michael calls the film Spartacus a classic whodunit. Which could be considered a categorical error, probably. In Season 6, Episode 2, The Meeting, the cold open gag of him asking Oscar if he should establish a safe word for his colonoscopy is a kind of categorical error, since of course that's not the kind of situation in which you need a safe word. In Season 7, Episode 19, Garage Sale, Michael thinks that asking Holly to marry him by spelling it out in lighter fluid and lighting it on fire in the parking lot is not a terrible idea, but a romantic one. A dangerous categorical error. And in Season 2, Episode 19, Michael's birthday, he sees Carol, the real estate agent, at the ice rink and asks her what she's doing there. Is the rink for sale? And she has to tell him she doesn't just sell real estate. This is fixation and over-specification of categorization, and an inability to have a fluid understanding of people having multiple roles and associations. Even such fundamental categories as pro and con, Michael isn't comfortable with, as we learn in Season 6, Episode 3, The Promotion, when we learn that Michael hates pro-con lists, which is quite illogical of him. One final categorical issue that is worth looking at before moving on is from Season 7, Episode 17, Threat Level Midnight, where we are jealous and he kills bad guys, so he kills this person he is angry and jealous at. It doesn't cross Michael's mind that this murdered character was not a bad guy and that Michael Scarn's angry jealousy is unjustified. Completely unjustified. One of the worst cringes of the series, kind of, in a certain way. A solid grasp on logic is obviously essential for anyone to have functioning social skills. A functioning sense of cause and effect enables someone to understand people's behavior and intentions accurately and to respond appropriately. A functioning sense of categories allows someone to set and maintain healthy boundaries, differentiate roles clearly, and see their place in society. Society would not exist without customs, traditions, and rules, but these require limitations, and limitations are not Michael Scott's strong suit. A quick example is in Season 2, Episode 10, Christmas Party. The fact that he can't stay to the limit of the gift pool and he gets Ryan the iPod because he loves Ryan. He just doesn't respect limits in their logical and constraining nature. His difficulty with accepting constraints makes ethical decision making almost impossible. In the business ethics episode that I previously mentioned, Michael also responds to Andy dropping the ethics bomb, "Would you steal bread to feed your family?" by saying that he would not steal bread and he also would not let his family go hungry. So yay. He's a centrist. He resolves the contradiction by having his cake and eating it too. He ignores the incompatibility. But who knows, maybe if he had been given the time to elaborate, he would have mentioned that what he meant was that he would call people to ask for donations of food for his family to mutual aid it up, or, contact farms or grow protein in a petri dish or something. But I doubt it, because his statement seems like a blanket one meant not to lead to detailed plans, but rather to stand as a forced conflict resolution. He can't problem solve within a constrained environment, which is why much earlier in the series he attempts to resolve Oscar and Angela's conflict over Angela's babies playing saxophone poster with a win-win-win solution of Oscar wearing the poster on his t-shirt, which most people would consider a lose-lose situation. Come to think of it, it seems notable that the management handbook Michael uses during this conflict resolution has a win-win-win option where Michael wins also for facilitating a resolution, but it doesn't have a lose-lose-lose option, implying that Michael gets credit for facilitating a good resolution but doesn't get blamed for facilitating a bad one. The perfect management handbook for someone who struggles with responsibility. Rarely does Michael seem conscious of the consequences of his actions being the consequences of his actions, which inhibits any shot he might have at learning. He doesn't seem able to connect the dots between the present, the past, the future, and the... Oh yeah, there's no other. He doesn't seem able to connect the dots between the present, the past, and the future, and regularly acts as if the future will never come. In Season 5, Episode 5, Crime Aid, how does Michael think he's going to get away with lying about there being Bruce Springsteen tickets? That is fundamentally illogical to think that the future won't come, that there won't be consequences of his actions. Of course, curtains close on such a time-sensitive lie. This is a pattern for him, though. Need I mention Scott's Tots? I don't even want to go there. But suffice it to say, that's another example of Michael assuming he'd get away with something impossible to get away with because he's acting as if the future will never come and hurting people because of it. In the rare situations where Michael realizes he's hurt people, like when he dissuades CFO David Wallace from promoting Jim or when he dumps Pam's mom on her birthday, he reacts by asking them to hit him. He wants to be punished as quickly and clearly as possible, not to have to talk about what he did wrong or how it affected the other person. Michael is a people pleaser to a problematic extent. For him, the most painful thing is to realize that someone's negative mental state is a result of his behavior, so painful that he doesn't even anticipate it. In Season 6, Episode 7, The Lover, when he breaks the news to Pam that he's with her mom, afterwards he tells the camera, "That could have gone one of two ways, but I never expected her to get upset." He shows an inability to consider the negative. In Season 1, Episode 6, Hot Girl, which is extremely cringy and just so bad and Season 1 vibey, he says about Oscar to the attractive salesperson that shows up that he calls him Oscar the Grouch and that Oscar had never heard that before and asks her, "Can you believe that?" And she says, "No, I don't believe that." To which Michael replies, "I know, it's unbelievable." Again, failing to comprehend a negative that would in some way reflect negatively on him. In Season 3, Episode 13, The Return, when Andy tries to suggest that Dwight leaving has positive consequences by saying addition by subtraction, Michael says that's impossible. In the same episode, when Jim is telling Michael that Andy is a yes man, Michael says, "Not always. Sometimes I say I don't like something, and then he says he doesn't like it either." Again, a fundamental misunderstanding of a logical principle, the difference between positive and negative, the idea that a double negative is a positive. To completely do without logic, even something as illogical as saying "let's suck in our guts" when standing on a scale still fits the form of logic in that it implies something will cause something else. Even treating a date like a therapist because she isn't your ideal degree of attractiveness still follows the form of antecedent consequent. Even promising to pay for college to a bunch of students without the funds to do so follows the logic that college will help these students. So of course it's true that Michael can function in a basic input-output way, but he's different in this. Let's say normal logical thinking is if this, then that, where this and that are facts or ways the world is. Michael still follows the form of logic, but his this and that are not facts, they're emotions. So if I feel this, I will make them feel that. Or if they feel this, I will make them feel this. etc., in any combination of subjects and objects of feelings. True, it can be argued that emotions are factual since they exist, but logical action requires that an emotion be examined before it is the basis for action. Is the emotion justified? Is the emotion to a reasonable degree? Will the action taken actually satisfy the cause of the emotion rather than just kind of like mirroring the emotion or sort of distracting from the emotion? Without thought mitigating between emotion and behavior, we are left with the unreasonable and illogical actions of Michael Scott. When he first quits Dunder Mifflin, he does it in a direct response to being given exactly what he asked for, a 15th anniversary party with all the trimmings. It's clear that he does this because he feels condescended to, but we don't ever hear him explain that. There isn't any reasoning, but we do see him getting attention telling his story of quitting, and he sure likes that. But viewers see that what happened was he felt hurt at being condescended to, so he acted out and punished David Wallace by quitting suddenly. Then, as fans know, he starts his little company and poaches clients from Dunder Mifflin to continue hurting them. But of course, this company doesn't last, and he's back at Dunder Mifflin soon enough. Hurt is not the only feeling that motivates Michael. Anger drives him too, though maybe less frequently. In Season 6, Episode 10, Murder, we see Michael at his most angry, besides maybe when Toby comes back from Costa Rica. He screams when Jim tries to make him stop the murder mystery game, tries to dismantle his illusion. This attachment to illusion is the hallmark functionality of Michael's illogical thinking, its most attractive prospect for others to benefit from when they need shelter from the perils of nature, or in this case, the whirlwinds of business that are causing uncertainty for Dunder Mifflin. But any emotionally intelligent viewer sees the fear beneath Michael's anger and sees the logic of emotions that causes his reflexive, unexamined behavior. And we get to see how Michael copes with sadness in Season 7, Episode 22, Goodbye Michael, where he says to the camera, "Sad? No. I don't leave until tomorrow, so tomorrow I'll be a wreck." But of course, he was lying, and he leaves a day early. Yes, leaving early allows him to avoid sad goodbyes, but that's not something most people would think is necessary in this situation. Leaving early is such an illogical idea that it's hard to even understand without understanding Michael's logic of emotions. His logic is, the last day is going to be unbearably sad, so I'll skip the last day. It almost makes sense. Thanks for watching my video. If you like this, you can check out the other videos I have, like this one, or this one, or this one, or not this one, but maybe this one, or that one, and let me know what you think. Oh, and also subscribe, because that makes me feel good. Thanks.